creativity comes in many forms. It might be the creative way you want to help a client shift perspective. So you might help them look at a situation in a different way by asking them questions that they wouldn't have asked themselves. But also I've used images quite a lot, and I really find images are really helpful to distance yourself from a challenge while also talk about it quite personally. So if you have an array of images and I ask you to introduce yourself using that image, you can explore and express so much more than you might have done if I just said, oh, just introduce yourself as you normally would have done. And it feels less personal and makes you feel less vulnerable in doing so. So images have been quite useful to me, whether that's images torn out of a magazine, or I've come across cards that you can use that have already been made that have different images and words that evoke thoughts and feelings. But I've also used nature as well, and I think nature is quite powerful in terms of unlocking creativity in others in coaching. I use those on my retreats particularly. I work with other colleagues, and whether that's actually crafting items, out of things we find, or walking in nature in order to find a space for reflection. I think nature is creative in itself, and a really creative way to help unlock your own answers.
Yes, I mean, that reminds me of what the ancient Greeks said, that the ancient Greeks used to believe that only the gods and goddesses can be creative. Like nature, we don't create nature, nature creates itself. And when people say, oh, save the earth, people will say, no, it's not the earth that needs saving, because the earth is well capable of restoring itself. It's human beings that will die, earth will carry on, and nature will carry on, long after human beings have gone.
Yes.
The plants and the trees, they will continue to survive.
Yeah.
Because it's that inner force, isn't it? It's that life force that doesn't really require manipulation as such. Do you think that's why being in nature helps us to maybe kind of feel more energized, because there's a lot of life force around us?
Yeah, I think I agree completely with what you're saying about the life force and the energy. But I think there's also just lessons there, lessons about how we evolve, how a branch can be cut off a tree, but it will continue to stay strong, and new branches will form. How actually buds close in the evening, but then they open again in the morning. About how hardy nature can be, how out of the crack in a building, something can grow. So I think there's just a lot of metaphors for life. I think it's, there's definitely something about energy and being drawn to different life forces, but I think there's something about the lessons that nature can teach us that perhaps we don't recognize or learn on our own.
Yes, it's that's exactly what I was thinking as well. When you were describing nature, I was thinking about all the metaphors, the strength of the trees and the diversity as well. That when we have so many different types of plants and the ecosystems, they rely on diversity. When we take away that diversity, when we try and cultivate too efficiently, then a lot of nature withdraws, and we do a lot of damage, which is not the ecosystem is not sustainable when we hamper with the diversity of nature.
Yes, yeah, you're absolutely right. I also think there's something about just being outside, and a lot of coaching is done inside in a room with four walls, and there's nothing wrong with that. But there's something about movement and the elements that can shift you as well. So the fact, either walking and talking, or even if you're just walking on your own in silence, but feeling the wind or feeling the sun or feeling the rain, again, can just, help you, shift how you feel, shift your mood, shift your thoughts.
Absolutely, because it's not just about thoughts, it's about the moods, it's about the feelings. So, you know, whereas a lot of people think of creativity as being a cognitive process, and it's much more than merely a cognitive process, because yeah, the as you say, the kinesthetic, the experiential elements, they enhance our ability to generate ideas and to look at things from a different point of view. And what you
Yeah.
said earlier about images, that's really important as well, because like when we look at Facebook and other social media things, you know, the images that we use as our identity, they are sometimes much more powerful than the words we use to describe ourselves.
Yes, yeah, I think you're right, and it's quite interesting. I went to a talk recently where they talked about hieroglyphics and how that was, you know, that was an ancient language, and how we're almost going back to it. You know, we've evolved into using words, but now we seem to be talking in pictures again, whether that's emojis or yeah, images on Facebook, you know, and that sort of thing. And how, yeah, it does, a picture does say 1,000 words, you know, it really doesn't. Sometimes the words are not enough for us in terms of how we want to communicate, or we can't find the words or don't have the words. And I know in different languages, for example, you know, for example, Eskimos have many, many more words for snow than we do, you know, and then different language may have many words for love rather than the one word we have. And I think we can surpass those barriers in a creative way using images.
Yes, and it's also about noticing different things as well. You know, like you talk about the Eskimos, they notice different kinds of snow, whereas the untrained eye, we just, you know, see it all as being the same. And it's the same in nature as well. Those who are, you know, who are really passionate about nature, they will notice things in nature that those of us who, you know, just go for a country walk now and again, we might not notice things which to those who are really experienced, they are a lot more perceptive. So creativity is about being alert and being perceptive to the differences as well, isn't it? And noticing what's in the gaps.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And you know, I love this idea of creativity, and also that it's very accessible to all. So the creativity is in all of us, and it is always present. It's up to us. You talked about noticing, up to us to notice, and up to us to also use it, to try it, to be playful with it. But that it's there, and I think that's quite. It's important for, I think, in coaching, for us all to embrace it, rather than be the person, I'm not creative, I don't want to try this, you know, all of that sort of thing. But know that we can engage in a playful way and an imperfect way, and that's okay.
Well, my research into creativity began when I had too many students saying, I'm not very creative. That's where I started to kind of explore this, like, why are so many people saying I'm not very creative? And then I realized, well, it's to do with our definition of creativity. These students were saying I'm not very creative because they thought creativity was synonymous with being an artist or being a musician or being a designer. And creativity is much more than that. And I think it's important to recognize that everyone can be potentially creative, but not necessarily in everything. You know, we're perhaps a lot more creative. Some people are more creative in words, and others are more creative in images. And so we have to find our own kind of talent, I suppose, as it were. So
and our own door in, isn't it, in a way? Yeah, it's our own door into our creativity.
Yes. So in your work as a coach, and you've written books, you've created different kinds of enterprises. So how did you find, you know, what, like, you were best at? You know, how did you find your own niche for creativity, as it were?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question because, as you said, people often think about creativity as being an artist or a fashion designer or that sort of thing. And I did study art, so I do yearn to sit in my garden painting and doing things like that. But I think through my work, it's the idea of just making something new. You know, if you think about my business, I'm always thinking about new ways of doing things. Um, and I like writing. If I can put some time aside to write, I am really energized by that. So just sharing my opinion in a blog, but also just thinking about new ways I can help people really. So when I think about my retreats, for example, they're probably my most creative space. Every retreat is different that I do, and I use different exercises, and I'm very playful in the way that I engage in trying new things that, you know, not tried and tested, but that I think will test and stretch those who attend, and also stretch myself in the way that I choose to be with them. So I think maybe I've created the retreats as my creative space. And my clients who come always say this is very creative, much more than they expected. They just expected perhaps to have a workbook and be writing, and we do some very different things. So yeah, so I guess it's that's a space for me to be creative, that I've made. But I think on a daily basis, I'm always thinking about doing things differently, trying new things, and yeah, evolving what I do.
I'm so, you see, I know that you do these retreats, but it's the first time you've actually told me how you experiment and how you're playful in these retreats. And that's heartening because very often I've been to retreats that are very formulaic. You know,
Yeah.
I've been on I've loved it the first time round, but the second time I've been on that same retreat, it's
Mm,
exactly the same.
mm,
Third time round, it's exactly the same. So, and they argue that it's a formula that works,
mm.
whereas I'm a very creative person. I don't like repeating the same thing. So it's, yeah, I'm impressed that your retreats are always different, but sometimes it's, you know, people can say, well, it's not sustainable to
Yeah.
make them different because then people don't know what they're coming to.
Yeah, I think I advertise them differently each time. So each time there's a different theme. So they know they're not coming to something that is exactly the same. But it's an interesting point because the facilitators who've joined me, or some people who've been before, say, "Oh, I thought we might have had that again," and we, you know, and I say, "No, we're not doing that this time. We're doing something different." So sometimes they are, you know, there might be a particular exercise that they really loved last time and they haven't got it this time, but they've got something else. Yeah, but it's an interesting question. Is it sustainable? It's something I'm not doing on a weekly basis, 3 times a year. We'll see. And maybe what I'll do is it will be a little bit pick and mix. You know, I'm designing all of these exercises, and each time there'll be a different combination that I've picked and mixed to bring together. If I get to a point where I find that the creativity is not, you know, not flowing for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is always this tension between trying to create a formula that works, trying to
Mm,
create a system that can be replicated because that can be franchised.
yes, yeah.
So there's that. And for me, I've never, you know, franchises, I've never seen the creativity in that.
Yes. Yeah, but I bet there is some somewhere. The creativity may be in the marketing of it. It may be. You know, I think we engage in different ways. Yeah, but yes, it's what is your business model? Maybe impacts how you decide to engage. And for me, these retreats are much more about, you know, they're much more about helping the women who come, and they're much more about a space for me to be creative and be very, very free in the way I choose to be. And that works. That's a good space for me.
Mhm.
Something about not labeling it as creativity, but just exploring and being playful and being imperfect with your creativity.